Good morning, Oracles. Well, I've had some people asking about, the statements that Meet Kevin had made over on YouTube, discussing, the free cash flow and the Bitcoin and his concerns about the company. If you guys have not seen it, James Stephenson actually had two different videos breaking it down very detailed. I'm not going to go into that kind of detail, but if that's the kind of stuff you guys want to see, I'll put the links to those two videos in the comments below because it's about a little over an hour long between the two videos, but he really breaks it down. So the basics of this are, does the Bitcoin sale affect Tesla's free cash flow? The answer is no, it does not. So what ends up happening is that gets reported on a totally separate line. Free cash flow has to do with operations of the business. Bitcoin and Bitcoin impairment do not affect cash flow of the company. It is totally a separate line item. And as James had stated in his videos, it is really just a transfer of assets. So you went from an asset of Bitcoin to an asset of cash. So one statement that is true is if Tesla did not sell the Bitcoin, their cash reserves would have been lower than they were in Q1, versus by the sale, they are now positive. However, the negative that we would have seen would have been very minimal. So if Tesla did not sell the Bitcoin, they would have been negative in their cash equivalents by about $200 million versus being up by about $800 million. Again, they have been between $15 and $20 billion in cash and cash equivalents for the last 7 quarters. So they're definitely holding this line for a reason. Don't know what the reason is. Maybe it's just because that to them is their safety net. Maybe they're going to be using it for, the factory ramps, just in case there's an issue, or if they're saving it up to put on for a new factory. Don't know, but they've been holding basically that amount of cash for the last 7 quarters. And quite honestly, because cryptocurrency is relatively new, it kind of confuses me. Like, crypto is so easily converted over to cash that, you really could have just kept the Bitcoin on the cash and cash equivalents line. They don't do that. Now, of course, we did see all the crypto issues that happened recently, where a lot of these crypto brokers were out there and they shut down people taking out any withdrawals. So maybe it's wise at this point to still keep it the way it is, but either way, Tesla was able to convert that Bitcoin over to cash. But again, it does not change the free cash flow of the company whatsoever. And the other thing to look at too is the fact that Tesla is still paying down their debt. So now they didn't have a lot of debt. At the end of Q1, they had $100 million in debt, and they paid off about $40 million of that in this second quarter. So they're down to $66 million right now. I have a feeling that by the end of the year, if not by Q3, they will have that paid off entirely. So once that's gone, they're not just going to have no debt whatsoever and a lot of free cash flow coming in. Because let's not forget that despite the fact that Shanghai was down for a month, despite the fact that Austin and Berlin were ramping slower than anticipated, and Berlin just barely got to profitability on their vehicles coming out of there, Austin was not profitable, and they still had $600 million in free cash flow. When we get these ramps coming for Austin and Berlin, we don't have those same costs. We are going to have significant free cash flow coming through. We're talking $5 to $6 billion per quarter of free cash flow coming in. So what are they going to spend this on? Are they just going to dump it onto their cash and cash equivalents pile that they already have? Or are they going to reinvest it? Now you got to remember, we've got FSD that they're still finishing up. We've got the Cybertruck, Roadster, Semi, Robotaxi, other projects that they haven't even announced yet, Optimus. Lots of other projects that they are going to be funding. And then Elon said with Master Plan Part 3, scaling to extreme size is one of the most important pieces of that. So maybe a lot of this cash and free cash flow are going to go into new factories and expansions on the current factories. So maybe they're just waiting for a certain point to pull that trigger and actually spend this money, and keeping themselves around that 15 to 20 billion mark as their safety net. And maybe once we get this split in the stock and they start having more factories out there, maybe they bump up that cash reserve a little bit just to be able to be a larger safety blanket for, anything that's larger happening because they're a larger company at that point. Again, lots of things that happen in the future, but they have a lot of versatility that they can work with because they have so much free cash flow that is going to potentially be coming in for the company. And looking at, potential recession numbers coming out, Janet Yellen over the weekend had mentioned that, a recession isn't just GDP numbers that are coming out. So I have a feeling she said this because she probably has an insight to what our GDP numbers are looking like. They're probably looking negative. So because of the statement she put out, I'm going to guess that we are going to get a negative GDP statement when it comes on the 28th. But as she said, it also includes employment. It also is going to be including productivity and production that's out there. So that could be what is known as a growth recession, where unemployment is still low, production is still high, but we do see a negative revenue growth for the economy. Totally possible. We will see what happens on Thursday. We'll see how the market reacts. Again, we are seeing a very volatile week coming up this week, most likely. A lot of macro news coming out in this last week of the month. Lots of big name earnings reports coming out. We've got the FOMC meeting looking at most likely a 75 basis point hike on Wednesday, then the GDP data on Thursday. So buckle up and brace yourselves for this week. But with that going forward and Tesla's free cash flow, if we get into this recessionary period, this to them is a very safe place to be. We had talked about it in the past. Elon has been through, when he was with PayPal, when it was just X.com, going through the dot-com bubble crash. That was very eye-opening to him, knowing what you needed to have to survive times like that. Tesla, when it just first started, back in the 2008 and 2009 recession, Tesla was in the same exact situation. They needed to raise cash. So now Elon has been through this twice, with one company that he's no longer with, and Tesla in the very beginning. He does not want to go through that again. So he is doing everything he can to prepare for the worst. So that's what we're looking at right now, and I have no doubt that he is just doing this to set themselves up so when we get through these very difficult times that could potentially be on the horizon, they can really take advantage of that and thrive coming through these tough times. So we'll pay attention to what Tesla is going to be doing, but I do see a very strong Q3 and Q4. And I think by the time we get Q4, the major ramp costs that we will be seeing coming out of Berlin and Austin will be gone, and then going into Q1 of next year, we will have a fresh, clean slate with very minimal costs, similar to where like a Shanghai is now. And then we'll get to the point where just the more vehicles that Austin and Berlin pump out is the higher the margins are going to be. And we could potentially see 35 to even 40% margins next year. So very exciting times coming up. Tesla's going to have a ton of free cash flow. So despite the fact that it was much smaller this quarter than it had been in the past, you can look and see the reasons why. With Shanghai being down for a month and slower ramps in Berlin and Austin, that's why. And so they did their due diligence to make sure they had, the cash that they needed on hand just in case. So as James had said on his video, they probably converted most of that to yuan because that's what they needed to support is the Shanghai factory. And looking at Meet Kevin and his reaction to this, I'm kind of torn. Like he owns a lot of Tesla stock. I think it's around 25,000 shares. He owns Teslas himself. He is bullish on the company. So I don't know if he put this video out because he knew that everybody else was going to be putting out positive earnings reports and he wanted to stand out with a negative one to get more of a reaction. Or maybe he was doing it because, he saw something that was different in there. Maybe he's playing options and he wanted to, do something to bring the price down because he does have a massive following of people. I don't know his reasons for doing it. I don't know if he genuinely thought that it did affect the free cash flow of the company. Truly don't know. I just know the facts, which are he owns a lot of Tesla stock. I believe it is the largest position he has in his portfolio. He is bullish on the company itself. So you guys can leave your reactions down below as to what you think it was all about. Personally, I'm just focused on the company. I kind of stay away from a lot of the drama, but I had people asking me about it, so I wanted to share my thoughts on this. Either way, again, it is not affecting their free cash flow, and regardless of whether it does or not, it doesn't really matter because looking down the road at Q3 and Q4, they're going to probably have better free cash flow in Q3 than they had in Q1, which means they're right back on track, still growing and in the right direction. Thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate all of your support and feedback. If you have not subscribed, please do so down below. Sign yourself up for notifications. I am over on Twitter at OracleTim1. I share all of the latest Tesla news, pertinent stock market information, and all of my daily trades. We do have a Discord chat, that link is down in the description, and if you'd like to support the channel any further, I do have a Patreon. Over there I post my valuation model, my price targets through 2032, my production forecast through 2024, all of my income and investments, my entire portfolio, and everything else for you guys to see for my expenses as well. Thank you all so much, have a great one.